Good afternoon. Welcome to milestone meeting of the county's budget work group. Are we recording? Yes, great. Okay. We spent the last month gathering information about the budget process with the help of our budget director, Paul Kreidler. And today, Paul will walk us through the fundamentals of putting together a budget. I would consider this a budget 101 class. The budget for a county of 1 million people is large and complex. We receive monthly updates on spending and revenue. We continue to look at the services we offer. We reconsider those services based on spending projections, and we are looking at other potential sources of revenue. One of those potential sources of revenue is a marijuana tax, which will be on the April 3rd ballot. Over the past several years, the county has seen expenses grow faster than revenues. We have had healthy reserves, and we've received some federal supplemental funding from pandemic relief, and that has kept us going. But we know that we cannot continue on this pathway of spending more than we have in revenues. So to address the budget properly, we have to understand all of our options. And to understand all of our options, we have to have more conversations and discussions, and that's part of what we're doing here today. So thanks for joining us. On today's agenda, there's an email for you all to submit questions. That email address is stlcobudget. That's stlcobudget at stlewiscountymo.gov. stlewiscountymo.gov. We also will be planning a series of town hall meetings to take our conversations to the public, and we will have more details for those as they become available. This collaborative effort between my office and the county council will keep our communication lines open and help guide us through this budget conversation process. So I'd like to thank you for all of your help, and I look forward to hearing from you. Before we move on to Paul's presentation, I'll turn this over to Council Chair Shalonda Webb for her to make a few comments.
Well, thank you, Dr. Page. I appreciate you for giving me an opportunity to address the community. And also, I want to thank all of those who've been working week after week to come before you all and gather this information to make sure that we all stay on the same agenda. So we have been working diligently to get our one-on-one budget training that's going to be shared with you all today. I have to be very upfront and open about it. It is quite a bit of information, but I think it's a necessity for us to be clear on you understanding what the process is, and you understanding what goes into this process. Even more, I am grateful for Paul and his team and Dr. Page's administration, because they are going to be bringing forth to us some additional tools, some interactive tools, so you can get engaged. Walking through some processes so you can understand as well how this all works. And I think this would help us to get to the best solution, not only for what we do in the future as it pertains to budgeting, so we don't find ourselves in this crisis again, but also what are we going to do about our current challenges? And so, again, I appreciate Paul, his team, Dr. Page's office, my colleague, Councilwoman Hancock, who's here with me, and also Councilwoman Dunaway, who serves in this workshop together, and representation from the council staff with Mr. Chris Howard. So again, I want you all to understand that all hands are on deck, and we're working together in good faith to ensure that this is successful, not only from an opportunity to work together, but to benefit and provide holistic solutions to the challenges that we have in St. Louis County budget. So thank you again, Dr. Page, and thank you, Paul.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Dunaway is traveling today and can't join us. Councilman Hancock, would you like to make any remarks?
No, other than just to say the process so far has worked the way that I think we've all wanted it to, which is to be a collaborative process, an open process, and a process that I think is going to lead us to the right conclusion, whether it's the conclusion we thought we were going to end up with or not.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
Thank you, County Executive Page, Chairwoman Webb, Councilmember Hancock, and Councilmember Dunaway in her absence, for the opportunity to speak with you today. And my name is Paul Kreidler. I'm the County's Director of Performance Management Budget. And I've been asked to provide a summary of some of the information that the work group has gone through over the past month. This information can actually all be found in our 2023 business plan and budget documents, which are available on the county's website. So 20 minutes is a pretty tight time frame to get a budget 101, and I can probably go on for 20 hours. But so we're just going to hit a few of the highlights today. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the budget timeline and review process, our funds and fund structure, and some information about revenues. And of course, I have to have slides. Let me bring those up, just to guide our conversation. So I'm going to talk about the budget timeline and review process from the executive branch side of the process, and then Chris Grant Howard, the council's budget coordinator, will take over and review the council's steps. We formally begin work on next year's budget 9 months before the start of the fiscal year. So in March, we're analyzing and summarizing the results of the prior year, and we're establishing our computerized infrastructure to collect the next year budget. In the late spring, we're updating our revenue estimates and making 5-year projections to determine what's affordable in both the next year and in the future. And so that's a combination of estimated revenues and fund balance. We're also establishing budgetary policy and instructions for our departments and offices to follow as they develop their budget requests. We then transition in June and July to the department-specific work where they're creating their budget requests. And these are very detailed. Every position, every fringe benefit, every office supply, every gallon of gasoline, every contract, and so forth are budgeted in detail. In the 2023 budget, we have 54,000 individual records that make up our budget. And anyone can look at these entries by visiting our open data portal on our website and visiting the Budget Detail 2023 dashboard. In the late summer, my team in the Division of Performance Management and Budget are reviewing the department requests for technical accuracy, and we're identifying budget or policy issues that require further discussion. And then we're having those conversations with the department staff and the county administration. By early September, the county executive will have made his final decisions regarding the recommended budget, and the budget and business plan documents will be drafted by my team. So that's over 500 pages of line item detail, narrative description, performance metrics, summary tables, and so forth. By October 1st, the county executive will deliver the recommended budget to the council as required by charter, and that requirement is 90 days before the start of the fiscal year. So at that point, we turn the process over to the council, and I'll turn this over to Chris for a discussion of their process.
Thank you, Paul. So just to back up a hair, so in the beginning of September, I will work with the council chair and the county clerk's office to draft a proposed hearing schedule. We'll send that out to the department directors so that they can, because as inevitably happens, we have someone who needs to switch. We work that around. Then in mid-September, I will send out a memo to all the department directors. I'll copy Paul, and that will include instructions from the council in preparation of hearings and the final schedule for hearings. Those hearings are noticed as a group, so there's one notice, public notice, for all of the hearings that the council will engage in. And then in October, of course, begins the hearings once the council's received the county executive's proposed budget. And there's a few steps that go into those hearings. Mid-November, then I will work with the council chair and the county councilor's office to plan based on the council's meeting schedule, the timing for dropping of the bills to make sure that the council will have a finally passed budget by the last meeting of the year or by December 31st before the charter hammer drops and changes all the equations.
And to Chris's point, if the council does not adopt a budget by December 31st, we revert to 1/12 of the prior year's budget every month until there is a budget. And I think it should be said that Chris and I are communicating frequently throughout the course of the year on various budgetary issues and concerns. So there is that constant communication. It's not just the administrative or the executive branch through October and then only the council for that last quarter. That collaboration is continuous. To help the work group focus in on areas of the budget that require the most attention, we spent some time understanding funds, their purpose, how we use and categorize them for the budget. So I like to use a checkbook analogy when I'm describing funds. And I think of, we have 26 funds in our budget, and think of them each as an individual checkbook with rules on where it can take money from and how it can spend money. So as I mentioned, we have 26 funds. We categorize them based on their characteristics, and I have the categories listed here on the left-hand side, and then I have them plotted out on the right-hand side. The general funds are the biggest group, 55% of our total budget, and these are the main operating funds of county government. They support more than 94% of our employees and all of our services that are not required to be accounted for separately. The special revenue funds make up 15% of our budget, and these have some sort of restriction on their revenue. So examples would be the Emergency Communications Fund or the Children's Service Fund. These two funds, as an example, receive a dedicated sales tax, and those funds have to be used for specific purposes. The Debt Service Fund is used to, it receives a dedicated property tax and is used to pay annual debt service on the county's outstanding general obligation bonds. The Capital Improvement Program funds are 4% of our total. They're used to record revenues and spending for our transportation capital construction program. Our public transit funds record sales taxes received for public transportation and distributions to Bi-State Development, also known as Metro. Finally, we have one proprietary or enterprise fund. That's our Spirit of St. Louis Airport Enterprise Fund, and that functions more like a business. The airport rents land and buildings and sells fuel and uses those revenues to operate their facility. So in general, money from one fund cannot be taken and moved to another fund. There are, of course, some ways that funds can work together. We can sometimes allocate revenues. Sometimes funds can purchase services from one another. An example would be Spirit Airport purchasing airport police services from the general fund, or other funds paying central service charges. But generally, once the money is in a fund, it has to stay there and be used for that purpose. We also focused on the all funds budget versus the operating budget. The first four groups at the top here, the general funds, the special revenue funds, the debt service fund, and our proprietary or enterprise fund make up what we call the operating budget. So the operating budget is the primary means by which most of the financing, acquisition, spending, and service delivery activities of the county are carried out and controlled, and they lend themselves to a year-over-year comparison. Two groups at the bottom are segregated from that operating budget for a couple of reasons. First, the public transit funds are used to record distributions to Bi-State Development or Metro, and those have nothing to do with the operation of county government. And the Capital Improvement Program funds support our Highway 5-year capital construction program, and so those vary widely year over year depending on which projects are programmed. So most of the work group's activities will be focusing on the operating budget, specifically the general funds, and in more detail, the general revenue fund and the health fund, where we have our most significant financial challenges. The takeaway from this is that although our budget is $984 million, as we talked about with segregating revenues and expenditures by fund, we don't have flexibility on how all of this money can be used. We have restrictions we must follow, so that's why we segregate them by fund groups. And we really get down to the general revenue fund is the one fund where we have the most discretion. The work group also spent a considerable amount of time in this first segment of meetings learning about our revenue structure and issues surrounding our two main sources of revenue, property and sales tax, and I'll touch on those briefly in a few moments. What I've detailed here just as an example, is the 2023 revenue projection for our 4 general funds. So we have 448 million of total revenue, and you can see them broken down here in the table and on the right-hand side in the chart. The largest source of revenue for the county is sales tax in the general funds, followed by property taxes at a close second. Those 2 revenue sources account for over 50% of our revenue, and that's where most of the policy decisions are in terms of revenue for us. If we look at all the taxes combined, so we'd also include utility, gross receipts, and casino taxes. Taxes represent 65% of our revenue. If we were to add in our transportation sales tax allocations, which is an allocation of our half-cent transportation sales tax between transportation operations, which is shown here, and the transportation capital program, which is not included here, then that total would increase to 70%. So in our meetings, we reviewed the characteristics of each category of revenue. We looked at the 15-year history of revenue performance and talked about the significant changes that we saw over time. And to the chairwoman's point, we're working on an interactive tool which will allow anyone to go to our open data page and explore visualization of that history by revenue source. For property tax, we discussed state requirements as they apply to our property tax rates, the timing and process of how we set our rates, and the impact of the reassessment process on our rates every other year. We looked at this graphic a bit. This graphic shows our 4 classes of property along the bottom. And then we show the tax rate that's currently in effect in this greenish colored segment of the bar. The bolded numbers at the top represent our tax rate ceiling. And the amount of the tax rate ceiling we choose not to use is this yellow section we call our voluntary reduction. So you can see across the various sources or the various classes of property, we have between 20 cents per $100 of assessed value and 40 cents of this voluntary reduction. So the estimated value of our decision to not levy up to the ceiling is about $47 million per year across our general funds. So the council or the county could choose to levy a rate up to this ceiling with a vote of the council. Exceeding that ceiling would require a vote of the public. We also looked at the average taxpayer bill and where it comes from. You can see on the left, in 2021, which is the last year we have complete data on at this point in the year, although a taxpayer submits their entire payment to St. Louis County's collector of revenue, only 4.7% of the average tax bill is retained by the county for county operations, and the remainder is distributed to other taxing districts, the largest of which being school districts. The graphic on the right shows growth in average tax rates by the type of government in St. Louis County from 1991 through 2021. So over this time period, school district rates have increased 56%. Cities have increased 52%. Service districts, which would include fire, light, and sewer, are up 87%. Other districts, which include the special school district, zoo museum district, and others, increased 66%. And the county's tax rates during this time have decreased 19%. So the county's tax rate has not increased for 38 years now. And finally, we reviewed the 9 sales taxes that provide funding to support county operations, what those funds can be used for, and whether those revenues are shared with other entities. So this table here shows the net amount of revenue we expect to receive into the county's financial plan. So when I talk about sharing, a few things to mention. The countywide 1% sales tax and the half-cent public safety sales tax are shared with municipalities based on population and other factors. The 2 parks taxes that follow on the table are distributed to regional parks organizations such as Great Rivers Greenway and the Municipal Grants Commission. County receives 100% of the rest of these sales taxes. However, the last 3, the transportation half-cent, the Prop M quarter-cent, and the Prop A half-cent, are distributed to by state development, again, also known as Metro, And some of these funds go to our transportation department as well. Only the 1% countywide sales tax is truly flexible in that it can be allocated for any governmental purpose. The rest of them have restrictions on what they can be used for. And one note here, only the first four are recorded in the general funds, in case anyone is looking at this total being 455.9 million, and the previous chart, which was only general funds revenues, which was only about 450 million as well. So we discussed, again, that the 1% sales tax is flexible. We have in the past allocated that to help support our parks department and our transportation department. We discussed that sales taxes are extremely responsive to economic conditions. And although the revenues are currently growing, that growth is not enough to offset our increasing costs of doing business. So this concludes my brief summary today. I will just note that for me and my team, we've appreciated the work group's attention over the past month and their commitment to increasing their knowledge about how our budget works. And my team is looking forward to continuing to support their efforts as they work or as they tackle the work that lies ahead.
Thanks, Paul. Any comments from our council members? Okay. Doug, do you know who's monitoring our email address today? No questions coming in on emails. Okay. Well, we will keep that email address available for you. That address is STLCO budget at stlewiscountymo.gov. That's stlewiscountymo.gov. We'll be monitoring that email address for questions, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And if we don't have any more comments from our council members, then we will conclude our milestone meeting today.
I do have a comment.
Yes.
I tried not to have a comment, but I have a comment. So I do want to make sure that the public sees this and understands that we're not doing a checkbox activity here. We are truly going and engaging in every level and for all departments. We've gotten our rules of engagement, of getting those basic budgeting principles down pat. Now in our next steps, and I know we didn't go too deep in that, that's where we're starting to engage with our departments and making sure that we look at everything. We look at opportunities to increase revenue. We look at opportunities where maybe their services are different or there's an opportunity for technology to be a benefit to us. And so I do, again, thank Paul and Chris and the team, because if you want to know, you don't have to get it from somewhere else. You can come straight here to these meetings, these milestone meetings, and then participate in a town hall. So you're not getting information secondhand, you're getting it directly and understand what our challenges are and what we're doing to address them, and put your input in there of how we should go about addressing certain things. There are so many people in our county that depend on our services, and we want to be mindful of those communities that need us and understanding that we do have limitations as well. So again, thank you for you and your team, Paul, Chris, and I look forward to the next working session and then the next milestone meeting.
And I would encourage everyone to look at our budget tools that are available online. There's a lot of information there, and it is very interactive. And we hope in the next couple of months to be unveiling an interactive tool that will allow residents, members of our community, to dig down into the budget line by line to make recommendations for increases and decreases, and make some recommendations on how we could bring our revenues and expenditures closer together. That's all we have. Thank you for joining us.